Hi there, it's Larold. Today I'm going to lay down a complete guide on how to play Brewmaster Monk. But before I begin, I want to go over a bit of important business. For the past several patches, 7.3 and 7.3.2, and now 7.3.5, I've been expecting significant balance changes for tank classes, and we haven't gotten any. In fairness to Blizzard, tank classes have been pretty well balanced for a while, but it's still unusual for them to go this long without changing things up. Since we're now at patch 7.3.5, supposedly the last major content patch for Legion, I want this video to serve not only as a guide on how to play this class, but also as a time capsule, because it will probably be the last major Brewmaster guide I make for Legion. This way, in 2021, when we're busy doing Lich King 2 Electric Boogaloo, I can watch this video and think, man, I used to really like Brewmaster, back before it became a range tank. Those were the days. Anyhow, let's get to Brewmastering. So let me dive into what I consider to be the top pros and cons to playing a Brewmaster. First off, it's mobility. Brewmaster has so much mobility that if you took half of it away, they would probably still be the most mobile tank. Brewmaster also deals amazing AoE DPS. While no tank can really compete with Vengeance Demon Hunter right now, Brewmasters consistently fight it out with warriors for the number 2 spot. They fall behind warrior a little bit in single target, but they're still pretty great. The class has a really simple, consistent rotation with the right legendary setup. Provoke provides a unique raid utility for quickly positioning bosses and can be a major raid DPS increase. And finally, Stagger makes monk tanks extremely forgiving. Most boss abilities can be taken without defensive cooldowns up at all. On that note, Brewmasters only have 2 cooldowns, a huge one and a talent. Brewmaster Monk's self-healing is entirely dependent on taking damage, and monks are more reliant on external heals than other tanks. Brewmasters have pretty limited Mythic Plus utility. They don't have battle res. They don't have any sort of death grip. They pretty much only bring to the table good AoE DPS, which most tanks have at least some degree of AoE DPS, a long cooldown AoE stun, or an AoE knockback skill that's a little clumsy to use. This is one that could go in the pros and cons section, but Brewmasters have atrocious tier 21 bonuses. This does mean that you're not beholden to getting the highest possible tier that you can, but it also means that there's really nothing to look forward to from raid from a gear perspective. Wearing the 2-piece is okay, but the 4-piece truly does nothing at all. So you really are better off just using whatever pieces of gear you can get that are the highest item level with the best itemization. And that's kind of a bummer. More than any other tank, Brewmaster has extremely specific relic and legendary needs. There are exactly 2 legendaries that you want to wear at all times, and there's really no shuffling it around. And with relic traits, you need to have facepalm on every single relic. If it doesn't have facepalm, it's worthless. That's pretty irritating. There are also gearing issues with Brewmaster. Haste is basically a worthless stat for Brewmaster, almost completely. There is nothing this game loves more than giving haste gear to Brewmaster monks. Ask me how I know. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump directly into talents. There is pretty much a one-size-fits-all talent setup for Brewmaster monks, although there are a couple of tweaks you can make, depending on the situation. Let's start with the first tier of talents. Eye of the Tiger is the go-to option about 99% of the time, but Chi Burst is worth using in large-scale AoE. It's a little clumsy to have to stop and actually cast an ability. It's not a defensive loss, it's clumsy. It doesn't feel great. Not my favorite. In the second tier, you have two pretty solid competing options. Tiger's Lust gives you an extra mobility cooldown, and Chi Torpedo greatly increases the power of Roll. Roll's a decent mobility cooldown on its own, but getting that extra blast of distance from Chi Torpedo, as well as the sprint afterward, is really nice. I tend to be more partial toward Chi Torpedo as of late, just simply because Tiger's Lust is on the global cooldown, and as a result can be somewhat of a DPS loss at times, but they're very competitive with each other, and it's really a lot of the time more of a personal preference situation. The big positive Tiger's Lust has going for it is that it removes slows and snares. So if you're in a situation where you really need to remove a slow, then Tiger's Lust definitely wins out there. In the third tier, Black Ox Brew is a must-have. You should use this 100% of the time. The fourth tier has three pretty useful options. Ring of Peace is a bit clumsy when compared to Death Grip, but it allows you to push enemies around. This will let you shove casters closer together or push packs out of sanguine pools. It also creates a safe space for players to stand when there are adds that fixate. Ring of Peace is pretty great. Black Ox Statue helps pick up constantly spawning adds or enemies that randomly drop threat. It also gives you the ability to AoE taunt, which is great when it's useful, but that is pretty rare. Leg Sweep is a big AoE stun on a long cooldown. It's good, but it's not exactly anything new and special. Tier 5 is another tier with three great options, and I hold it up as a pinnacle of good talent design. Healing Elixir is a reliable self-heal, and it's the go-to talent for soloing and easy content. In raids and high-level Mythic Plus, a modest self-heal kinda pales in comparison to just reducing your overall damage intake, but it is still a very useful talent. Mystic Vitality provides a significant reduction in overall spell damage taken, and is the preferred choice when you're going to be regularly barraged with spell damage. Dampen Harm is a medium strength, medium cooldown defensive cooldown. It's very medium. It can make or break you in some situations, and it is a good fallback option. Rushing Jadewind is the only usable option in Tier 6. Tier 7 is maybe a little bit controversial. Elusive Dance is bad, this is pretty widely agreed on. It's bad, don't use it. Blackout Combo is really the way to play Brewmaster. It makes your Blackout Strike empower your next skill. The Breath of Fire and Purifying Brew empowers are totally worthless, and the Keg Smash and Iron Skin Brew empowers have very limited value. The only skill you really should ever use this on is Tiger Palm. This makes the class rotation focus around comboing Blackout Strike into Tiger Palm. That's how it works, and it's great. The damage increase to Tiger Palm stacks with the damage proc from Face Palm in the Relic Tree, which can cause your Tiger Palms to hit well over 2 million damage. High Tolerance is hilariously behind Blackout Combo on damage, and it completely devalues using Facepalm relics, but it does make you slightly more resilient against burst damage, which can wind up meaning a lot in Mythic raids. It's pretty much only worth using in the absolute highest end Mythic raid situations. So with talents out of the way, let's talk about the class rotation. Although I don't personally advocate High Tolerance, here is the rotation if you're using that setup. Keg Smash on cooldown, Blackout Strike, Breath of Fire, Tiger Palm to avoid capping energy, and Rushing Jadewind to fill. The basic ability rotation for how to play Blackout combo, assuming no legendaries, is a little sloppy, but here it is. If you have the legendary shoulders, it really doesn't change the base rotation at all. It just makes things a little bit more forgiving in terms of using Keg Smash on cooldown. Instead of having to use Keg Smash the moment it comes off of cooldown, you're able to kind of bank it a little bit and have one charge on cooldown, or have both charges on cooldown, what have you. If you have the legendary chest but not the shoulders, then the class's rotation actually turns into an actual old school rotation. Keg Smash, Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm, Breath of Fire, Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm, Rushing Jade Wind, repeat. Once you have both chest and shoulders, the way the class is meant to be played, the ability priority looks more or less like this. You want to keep at least one charge of Keg Smash on cooldown at all times. You should always try to Breath of Fire between Keg Smashes. It doesn't really matter whether it's immediately after, although that is how I like to open up on pulls, and pretty much how I like to play it in AoE situations. As long as you Breath of Fire after every time you've Keg Smashed, that's fine. In addition to that, you want to try to fill the gaps between Keg Smashes with as many Blackout Strike to Tiger Palm combos as possible. Because Blackout Strike has a 3-second cooldown, you want to generally treat it like Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm, something else. If you can do that throughout the entire fight, that will pretty much maximize your DPS. Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm, Keg Smash, Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm, Breath of Fire, Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm, Rushing Jade Wind, and so on from the time you start all the way until the time you've ended. That's pretty much how it's done. Lastly, you want to maintain Rushing Jade Wind. If you can keep Rushing Jade Wind up around 100% of the time, that is indeed ideal. You'll note that I haven't mentioned Exploding Keg, and that's not because it's unimportant, but because it's a pretty minor defensive cooldown. In single target, it is a decent damage skill, and you should try to use it on cooldown. But in AoE, it's an enormous DPS cooldown, and you should make a point to hit as many targets as possible with it. This means that if you need to hold it briefly in order to wait for targets to stack up or spawn or what have you, then you should do that. You should try to maintain 100% uptime on Iron Skin Brew. It has a duration limit of 300% of its base duration. The base is 8 seconds with a completed artifact, so the cap is at least 24 seconds. This means if you cast Iron Skin Brew and it has more than 16 seconds remaining, you are wasting brew time. If you use Black Ox Brew the moment you run out of brew charges, which you should, you'll notice that you're at a major surplus of brew charges. This is intentional, and it's a clumsy way Blizzard has tried to constrain Brewmaster's overall power. It works fine, really. It's sloppy, but it has helped Brewmaster be more in line with other tanks, and ultimately everything is totally fine. Probably the biggest question I ever get asked about how to play Brewmaster is, how often should I Purifying Brew? Technically, you could just spend every 5th brew or so on Purify, and that would be fine, but really you should try to Purify whenever you need to reduce your damage intake over the next 10 seconds. Pretty much, Purify after big hits of damage, whether it's from enraged mobs or major boss casts. You can also try to Purify just simply when you get lower on health as a way to help your healers catch up. Again, the most important thing in using Purifying Brew is to make sure that you never let Iron Skin Brew fall off because you were purifying. The amount of damage reduction that Purifying Brew actually accomplishes is so small compared to the health stability provided by Iron Skin Brew. Managing Iron Skin Brew versus Purifying Brew is kind of like juggling chainsaws while you're making a grilled cheese sandwich. Sure, one side of the sandwich might have gotten a little darker than you liked, but did you lose an arm to a chainsaw? No? Then I think you'll be alright. Now let's move on to gear. Let's lay down the stat priority. Versatility is about equal or slightly better than crit. It's certainly more consistent, which makes it generally a little bit more desirable, but they're very close in value. Both of these are quite a bit better than Mastery, but Mastery is still a decent damage reduction stat and not a bad damage output stat either. Haste, as I previously mentioned, is almost zero value. Try to avoid haste wherever you can. The legendary priority is pretty much a 2-item list: Sal'salabim's Lost Tunic and Stormstout's Last Gasp. Ugh, those are tongue twisters. Definitely makes you wonder how you're supposed to say that while you've been drinking. There are a couple of other legendaries that are worth mentioning. Archimonde's Hatred Reborn, while not on the level of those two at all, is still a decent DPS cooldown and a very small defensive cooldown as well. There is also a different legendary setup that runs Gaiplin's Soothing Sash and Soul of the Grandmaster. Again, it's for the highest end rating progression, and it is not mandatory even for that. It's pretty much something that was used only by people who are going pure turtle. I want to give a special mention to Insignia of the Grand Army, the legendary that you're able to get guaranteed just simply by clearing out Antorus. It's not good. If it's all you have, then you should definitely wear it, but just know it really doesn't compete with anything else on the list. Alright, let's take a look at trinkets now. Aman'Thul's Vision is amazing. Wear it 100% of the time if possible. Agrimar's Conviction is pretty solid as well. Unless you have Aman'Thul's Vision, you should wear Agrimar's Conviction pretty much all of the time. While trinkets that proc from damage taken are not normally great for any tanks, but especially Brewmasters, Agrimar's can proc from stagger ticks. This tremendously cuts down on bad luck when compared to other tanks. Additionally, the stats, agility, and versatility are both great. Dima's Glacial Aegis is a strong damage reduction trinket that shines in AoE tanking situations. It's a decent DPS trinket as well. Smoldering Titan Guard is a very cheesy trinket. It's not good under normal circumstances, but in large-scale AoE, it can deal absurd amounts of damage. That's about all it's good for, and the negative effect of this trinket is pretty punishing, but there you have it. Unstable Arcano Crystal is a good trinket option. It's not quite as good for Brewmaster as it is for every other tank due to haste having next to zero value, but it's still way over budget for its item level. A high item level Unstable Arcano Crystal from the Relinquished Vendor on the Vindicar can compete with just about every single trinket in Legion. Darkmoon Deck Immortality is another trinket that's worth way more damage reduction than its item level indicates, and it's probably still the most reliable damage reduction trinket. It has fallen by the wayside a bit, as other trinkets are Titan Forging up into the stratosphere, and it's still staying down at item level 900, which it will for the rest of time. Agility Verse and Agility Crit stat sticks are great trinket options. They pack a lot of offensive and defensive value. Jumping to Brewmaster Tier 21, the set bonuses are bad. How bad? Well, against more than 2 targets, the 2-piece bonus does literally nothing. It's really unfortunate that going over 100% dodge chance with Brewmaster Mastery is wasteful, but that's just how it works. Whether your chance to dodge is 101% or 1300%, once you dodge, all of your Mastery stacks are removed. With current gear values, this means that if you're already at 2 or 3 stacks of Elusive Brawler and you cast Breath of Fire, that 2-piece bonus isn't doing anything for you, even in single target. Against 2 targets, the bonus sometimes does nothing, and sometimes is a decent increase to dodge chance. In single target, it's usually a modest increase to dodge chance, but it can still wind up totally wasted as well. The 4-piece bonus is worthless. Literally, if you're wearing the legendary chest, the 4-piece bonus will never do anything at all. You could drop the chest and wear 4-piece instead. I've had people suggest this before. The problem is that there is no other legendary, even combined with 4-piece, that remotely competes with the chest. The only reason to ever wear 4-piece would be if you haven't already acquired the chest. At this point in the expansion, that's just terrible. Tier 20 bonuses are still great. The 2-piece provides a massive increase to self-healing, and the 4-piece interacts with that awesome 2-piece to grant free stagger reduction. Unfortunately, item level is still very important, so you should only hang on to tier 20 gear if you have high Titan Forges. Otherwise, losing 20 or more item level to hold onto old set bonuses is just not worth it. Here's how to set up your gems and enchants. An agility gem is good for maximizing your DPS, but by no means mandatory. Versatility and crit gems are both great. Versatility is a little bit more reliable, but crit has higher DPS potential. They're both very close. As for your neck enchant, I recommend Hidden Satyr. You could run another defensive enchant, but the value of them is pretty limited, and the DPS value of Hidden Satyr is pretty decent. For your cloak enchant, run agility, and either versatility or crit for the ring enchant. Again, versatility is a little bit more reliable, crit less so, but it has higher potential. To move on to relics, I created a Brewmaster Netherlight Crucible guide video back when the NLC was introduced, so if you'd like a deeper analysis on that, check it out. By far, the most frustrating aspect of trying to gear a Brewmaster is that Facepalm is a mandatory trait. Weapon item level is almost completely irrelevant to Brewmasters, since all of your abilities' damage and healing values are based solely off of attack power. Weapon damage just never comes into play in any significant way. The reason this is so frustrating is that Facepalm relics are insanely hard to come by. There are exactly 3 in all of the Mythic Dungeons in Legion, 2 from Greater Invasion bosses, and 0 in all Legion raids combined. The Netherlight Crucible and Relinquish Vendor have made getting Facepalm relics easier, but Brewmaster relic upgrades are still rare. Worse yet, even when you do manage to get one, it's usually just not a big deal. To provide some practical numbers, if my Fury Warrior's 940 Iron Relic magically increased to 985 item level overnight, his DPS would go up by about 125,000. If my Monk's 915 Life Relic magically increased to 985 item level overnight, his DPS would only wind up going up by about 20k. Once a relic gets through the pass-fail Facepalm test, the tier 2 traits are by far the most important thing to consider. The 5 traits that deal damage are the strongest performers, and they should be your priority. There are only 3 important relic traits other than Facepalm. Hot-Blooded and Potent Kick are both solid, roughly equal defensive traits, and Draft of Darkness is the only significant offensive trait. Beyond those 3 traits, everything else is pretty close in value. Well, I think that about covers it. Like and subscribe, leave a comment, and so on. This is YouTube, you know how it works. Thanks for watching. Bye.